Let's say a very good morning to Isabel Oakeshott, TalkTV's international editor. Isabel, how are you doing this morning?
Morning. Well, there's no shortage of things to talk about, is there? I mean,
I don't know where you start. My favourite line is this idea that the escaped prisoner from Wandsworth is going to get himself into a boat and try and get across to France. There's absolutely no way that they would allow that to happen. His name is Daniel Abed Khalife. Some suggestion that he might have connections to the Iranian government. Nobody's quite sure how serious his crimes were that he was accused of. But extraordinary that he can get away out of Wandsworth prison quite so easily, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's really like something out of a movie, isn't it? Some cross between Shawshank Redemption and Paddington.
Yes.
You know, prison scenes and Paddington's in his chef's outfit. It just reminds me of that. But actually very serious, as we've been discussing on earlier programmes on Talk this morning, with very, very grave questions to be asked about how he came to be able to do this. And also this question mark over whether he has actually been working for a hostile state. Now, I understand from a very well-placed source this morning that there is credibility in that and that hostile state is indeed Iran. I just want to caveat that by saying that I can't quote anyone on it, but it is a well-placed source. And I think that is extremely concerning. Very young man. You know, questions may be asked about his heritage and the selection process for going into the armed forces.
Yeah.
I think as of today, the focus will, of course, be on the state of our prison services, which we already knew were chaotic. And this will be, frankly, the tip of the iceberg. I'm sure there have been many near misses and other horrendous things that happen on a daily basis, frankly, that we don't hear about. Well,
we're told that certainly in this particular prison, the prison warder, prison officer population is depleted by about 30%, that they've only got really about 70% of the staff, which in effect probably means they've only really got 50% once you figure out sort of, you know, rotas and days off and holidays and all the rest of it. So they're probably operating on a very, very sort of shoestring type staffing arrangement.
Undoubtedly, and you forgot to add to your list of rotas and all the rest of it, sick leave. You know,
yes.
So many public sector workers, in common across the board, actually, it's not just the public sector, but are currently on incapacity benefits. A huge problem, actually, within the armed forces. Not always that people are literally off sick, but they're not sort of battle ready. Only a fraction of our already depleted armed forces are actually deemed fit enough to go into any kind of war.
Right.
So very much the same is happening across the hospital estate as well. So, you know, in a sense, this has been brewing and a disaster waiting to happen. But it's the sheer creativity of this escape that I think captures the public imagination, and also the fear of what else he might be planning. I'm slightly surprised that he didn't just sort of see out the process in prison and the next stage of the judicial process, because frankly, given the state of our judicial process, he probably would have got off without so much as of the trouble he's now going to be in.
Well, this is the other thing that people don't realise the extent of, which is that people tell me an awful lot of the time that a suspect will turn up for a court hearing. For some reason or other, the police officer in the case doesn't turn up. I mean, imagine in this case, if it is a terrorist suspect, then it might be slightly more high priority. But quite a lot of the time, the police officer doesn't turn up, case gets dismissed, the guy gets released.
So this is nothing new. I actually remember when I did jury service, probably about 15 years ago, exactly that happened. I don't believe in my case that the defendant was just let off. It's just the whole thing was a complete waste of time. Everybody gathered, you know, as requested at whatever it was, 9 in the morning, a full jury selected. All the other relevant people there, the judge, and we all sat and twiddled our thumbs, and unfortunately the relevant case officer didn't turn up, and that was that, and the whole thing was shelved to another day. And you wonder why on earth we have such a huge backlog in the courts. It's just one of the many reasons why things just back up.
Yeah, it really is unfortunate, isn't it, and ridiculous. But I mean, a lot of people this morning asking me the question on Twitter and elsewhere on text messages as well. And, you know, how does a terrorist suspect get access to a kitchen where there are loads of knives? And others saying, well, would you want him sort of running around behind you on a battlefield or even a practice battlefield with a rifle?
So yeah, I am exercised by his entry into the British Army. As I understand it, he is British born.
Yeah.
So perhaps, there's a debate to be had, and people will disagree on this as to whether or not we look too closely at someone's heritage. I don't know what his heritage is. The suggestion, as I say, from well-placed government sources is that, sorry, let me correct that, from a well-placed political source, is that he is associated with the Iranian regime in some way. Now, it may be that he's British born, but I'd like to know about his parents. I'd like to know what checks were made when he was allowed into the army. Now, as you said earlier in your program with Kev, he wouldn't have had access as a very junior member of personnel. He wouldn't have had access to any secrets, really. So we, again, need to know how it was that he came to be able to get hold of anything that was of any use to anybody.
Yeah, exactly right. But, no doubt we will be... I mean, I suppose, as we said on the show before this one, the longer he stays out, the more difficult it will be to find him, I suppose. But I've got a reasonably high hope that he will be found probably today and possibly within the next few hours. Don't ask me why. I just feel as though, something will be done. Because the one thing, once the security guys do get involved, it tends to be a little bit more well-organised.
Well, do you know what? I'd love to share your optimism, but if he has duplicate passports travelling under a different name, I mean, I came back through Heathrow last night. It was an absolute zoo. The idea that there is the capacity there to perform meticulous checks on all potentially duplicate passports, to check fully for one individual, needle in a haystack doesn't even cover it. So I'm not sure, who knows where the guy's gone. Probably the most dangerous thing for him would be to try to fly out of the country at this stage. It'd be nice to think that within hours he will be back behind bars, but I'm not quite sure I share your optimism.
No, well, I mean, I'm just that sort of guy. I mean, if I was so pessimistic that everything didn't work and nothing was ever going to be any good, I think I might as well just evaporate or emigrate or go and live somewhere else, because that's kind of how you feel. But the other irony, of course, is that they've concentrated all of this effort on one guy who wants to leave the country. Meanwhile, there's hundreds and hundreds of people coming into the country, and we don't know who any of them are.
Well, indeed. And as I say, I flew back in to Heathrow last night from the Gulf, and the place was absolutely thronging. And the vast majority of that additional crowd was, according to those who work at Heathrow, associated with the start of the new academic year, and huge numbers of foreign students, by the way, bringing their dependents entirely legitimately, because this is what we allow. And we know from the most recent set of government immigration figures that the number of dependents and students coming in is absolutely skyrocketing. And the truth is that a lot of them just never leave.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I was listening to Michelle Donlan this morning being quizzed on our favourite breakfast show on the national radio station known as Radio 4, and they were very upset with her because the Horizon programme seems to have been reignited, and they said to her, well, why aren't you allowing people to bring their spouses and their families with them if they're coming here to study some kind of scientific degree? And it's like, well, sorry, you don't have a right to bring your entire family with you just because you're a student coming here. And this has raised its head again with Suella Braverman over the visas being given out to Indian students who want to come here and who want to bring families with them as well, because it's so easily abused, isn't it?
It's absolutely ridiculous. If I wanted to study in India, I wouldn't expect to bring my partner and the children trailing along.
No.
If I'm a young person studying, that's the decision I'm making. I'm going to go and do the degree or whatever it is and come back again. You don't expect to bring your granny and your auntie and all the rest of it.
Right. And my 40 brothers. And you go, oh, really? I didn't realise it was such a big family.
I mean, it is different, of course, if somebody is, very eminent scientist, they're coming over on a fellowship, there's a set period of time and it's sponsored by, one of our best universities. That's obviously a very different case. They're coming to a fantastic job, not coming to just study something at some made-up course at some frankly made-up college.
Yeah, exactly right.